Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I am Billy Embody. Happy Monday to you guys. Appreciate you guys all being here this morning as we get ready to dive into Selection Sunday, what all the NCAA tournament bracket looks like as we learned the 68 teams that made it into March Madness. Really excited to run that down for you guys as 8 ACC teams made it in, and we had a terrific ACC tournament with some of the league's best showing up in a big way, particularly to get to that Final Four in that tournament. And then, of course, Duke outlasting Virginia to take their third ACC title in 4 years. I'm Billy Embody. We have a fun show for you guys today as we'll jump into bracketology, what got right, what got wrong for James Fletcher and On Three, as he will arrive at 8:20 a.m. Central Time with us as we will react to what was a busy weekend in Charlotte for the ACC, and then, of course, what all it meant for the NCAA tournament, seeding, some teams falling, some teams sneaking in, and some teams getting rewarded at a high level like Virginia. So we'll break down what all that means for you guys on this show. I also want to dive in a little bit on the running back position as spring ball arrives, because the league does have a really quality group. I feel like heading into the 2026 season, I want to spotlight some of the running backs. We talk a lot about quarterbacks on this show, so we'll get into that in just a bit. But do want to shout out our friend Jerry Morphew for being in the chat. Happy day for SMU. Absolutely. We will talk about the Mustangs and what their tournament selection means. And Robert Webb, let's rock and roll. That's right. SMU going up to Dayton to try and rock and roll against the really kind of rock stars of the MAC in a sense. Miami of Ohio, they fell in the MAC tournament, but they do sneak in as an at-large for the league, which is a huge deal for the MAC. But for the ACC, it would be a huge deal if SMU could just take care of business against Miami of Ohio. We'll break down that matchup here as they'll get going Wednesday night in the first four. And of course, we'll look ahead to Texas, NC State, as they'll be in the first four Tuesday night in Dayton. So 2 ACC teams headed to the first four, and one that was kind of surprising as far as bracketology went, but not surprising with the way they played down the stretch. We'll get into all that and more with James Fletcher of On Three again at 8:20. As we get the show going, I do want to remind you guys that we are, of course, presented by our friends at Security National Bank on Mondays. Security National Bank. You guys ever feel like you're not taken care of on a more personal or family level with people that are in your personal world or business world that really should have a large amount of trust, a large amount of camaraderie with you? Well, that's what Security National Bank is for. With their service, they have that really just family feel to them when you're talking with them. And as we bank with Security National Bank here at All Access AM, we continue to feel that way. You know, just that personal touch, that, hey, you know, how's your son? How's your family doing? How are things going with you? What do you like to do outside of work? All of those things to try and get to know you and get a better understanding for your goals, your long-term objectives, both as a business and as a person. So give them a call today, 402-344-7300. That is Security National Bank. Security National.bank is where you can reach them online. So securitynational.bank for more information on how they can help you. You can take a look at all their options today. So appreciate their support of All Access AM and what we're doing here, which is giving ACC fans a live show, 8 to 9 a.m. Central Time, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll kind of see how that schedule goes with the NCAA tournament. I already know that I'm going to be on a flight Wednesday morning and Thursday morning. So we'll have to break all that down and see what we do there for this week's round of shows. But I will say this, with spring practice heating up, I do want to start doing some shows where we get some people on and maybe they don't end up being live just because you stack up all these interviews and things like that, and you've got to pop them in regardless. So do want to try and get some folks on from some of the other schools to kind of preview and talk about, for those schools that are in the middle of spring practice, what all that means for their school. So we'll continue on with a lot of that spring ball conversation that we've had on the show so far. So appreciate you guys being here on this Monday. If you're in the chat, appreciate all the chiming in that you're doing. Just made my day, starting it off with Robert and Jerry. And Yad, who I'm sure is a bot, says hello. So hello, Yad, as well. But nonetheless, we get going. We look back on the ACC tournament in Charlotte, and that Tuesday we talked about, that Wednesday we talked about, but Thursday the quarterfinals really had a lot of fun in those games. Some really close matchups with three of the four being tight that set the stage for the semifinals, and then of course the final. Virginia took care of NC State, and that loss, that big deficit that NC State had in that game maybe ended up hurting them a little bit in terms of where they were seated. They did get a win over Pitt, of course, to advance to the quarterfinals, but losing to Virginia just by kind of a wider margin, 7 points or so, that maybe hurt them in the end. I mean, if they could have gotten that one into a nail biter, maybe that leaves a different feeling in the committee's eyes, and they sneak into the field of 64 for the NCAA tournament. But Miami then took care of Louisville 78-73. Duke, man, I got to give Luke Laux a lot of credit. And despite my feelings on them turning down an NIT bid, you've got to give them a ton of credit for the way they finished the season. And FSU is just a team that I think when you're buying stock in the ACC, you have to buy stock in FSU basketball right now. Just the program that they've assembled in year one, the way they've turned that ship around as they've gotten into the league, and then the way they finished and being able to beat a Cal team that was a bubble team at one point for the NCAA tournament. FSU beat them in the 8-9 game to advance to the quarterfinals, and then you take Duke all the way to the wire. I mean, you're so close, and we talked about it on this show. You did not want to be a team facing FSU. They showed why against Duke. They did fall 80-79, but man, what a finish. They finished 10-8 in league play in the regular season. They finished 18-15 overall, 10-3 in their final 13 games of the season, but they will not be playing in the NIT, which I think as you're building a program, sometimes that could be a springboard for you, but they're ultimately going to decline that and focus on roster retention, roster building, and get the second year under Luke Laux teed up and ready to roll there in Tallahassee. So I think for the NIT, that's a loss. I think FSU could have gone deep into it the way they're playing. And they have a lot of work to do, though. 6 departing seniors off that roster, including a fan favorite on the show here, Robert McCray V. The transfer portal window begins April 7th, and Luke Laux and his crew, they have a lot to do leading up to that. And there's a lot of contracts and roster moves that you've got to make in today's day and age of college basketball. So I wonder one day what the NIT is going to become. That's a conversation for another day, but just a lot of credit to FSU for what they've been able to do this season, finishing strong in league play. You get to North Carolina, Clemson, another close one, but Clemson able to take down the 4 seed UNC, again, 80-79, kind of a theme here. And for UNC, I mean, their season was just so interesting, and obviously the loss of Caleb Wilson is certainly going to make an impact there. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But it was a bit of a reality check for the Tar Heels. Losing that game to Clemson, a team that hadn't played well down the stretch and kind of been all over the place, all over the map, and they lose their first matchup in Charlotte, and they had gotten the double bye into the quarterfinals. And so UNC didn't have a chance to really do much of anything, of course, in Charlotte by losing that game. And that hurts. There's, no doubt about that. They would have had a chance to at least show a little bit, as far as proving that without Caleb Wilson, they're going to be, a different team, or they're going to be a team that, the committee should reward. But nonetheless, they make the NCAA tournament as a 6 seed. But losing to Clemson the way they did, I think just cost them in a big way. And it's going to be a tough challenge for them as they get into the NCAA tournament and take on VCU, a pesky VCU team as an 11 seed. and we'll see kind of how that goes for UNC. But they were unable to get past Clemson in that first game. And again, it just kind of goes back to what team is UNC now that Caleb Wilson is not on that roster. He's done for the year. That's a really, really difficult loss to overcome, but that's why they pay Hubert Davis the big bucks. It's going to be a difficult challenge now for them. So they've got to circle the wagons. They've got to get on the right side of things. But that was just too deep of a hole for them to overcome it. And they tried to overcome that huge deficit they built themselves, and just too much. You can't do that against Clemson. You really can't spot them a lot of room because they are so deep. They can kind of roll their lineup, and they play so hard. I feel for Clemson. Carter Welling with his torn ACL as well. That's another team that, as you enter the NCAA tournament, is going to look so different. And again, he's your 6'11" big man who was averaging double figures and grabbing 5 or so rebounds a game. That is a big loss for Clemson. So the ACC as a whole is in a spot right now where SMU's hopeful they'll have BJ Edwards back, but UNC doesn't have Caleb Wilson, nor not NC State. Louisville, what are they going to look like with or without Michael Brown? Are they going to have him? Because they lost to Miami. They just were able to overcome not having Michael Brown against SMU in the second round of the ACC tournament, and really that was another one for SMU that slipped through their fingertips. So there's a lot of injury concerns, and then of course Duke, Pat Ngungba, who we'll talk about, and John Shire was optimistic about where he's at from a progress perspective, but not having Isaiah Evans, not having Pat Ngungba, sorry guys, for that potentially first round or round of 32 matchup. Those are big things when it comes to postseason play, and when you don't have some of those key players, it's going to make a difference. It's going to impact your roster, no matter how you want to view it. So before we kind of keep going on the ACC tournament, do want to remind you guys now that March Madness is here. Our friends at Sportsmo can absolutely deliver you more March Madness experiences by helping your favorite college team get to the NCAA tournament. That's by Sportsmo's incredible ability to fund your college program's athletic department, paying for your players. That is what Sportsmo is all about. You can make micro donations. You can bet head to head against friends, whether they're opposing teams or whatever. You can do all that. You can throw some money on it for the NCAA tournament. Do all of that. Because guess what? If you win, you're able to donate it right to the school's athletic department. It goes right to it. It's also tax deductible. So make sure you download the Sportsmo app today and get locked in for March Madness today, and start making those micro donations. Huge opportunity here for you as a fan of an NCAA tournament team in particular to make an impact on your roster today.
College basketball hits different with Sportsmo. You tap, they score. You pledge, they drop a 3. You give as a group, they win as a team. At this point, you're not watching a game, you're in it. Download the app, fund your wallet, and get in the game. Download Sportsmo. Power the play.
That's right, Sportsmo. We appreciate their support of All Access AM. We'll have James Fletcher on in about 5 minutes, but by then we should be wrapped up on our recap of the ACC tournament. We moved to the semifinals. Virginia takes down Miami, a dominant performance by the Hoos, as they win 84-62 to punch their ticket to the championship game. Duke beat Clemson, again, double figures, kind of a ho-hum semifinal round as Duke wins 73-61 over Clemson. Again, Clemson without Carter Welling. Miami just kind of in a different spot right now. First time head coach, and Virginia was clearly on a mission in this ACC tournament. And of course, because of that, delivered an incredible ACC championship game. Duke and UVA were battling it out. It was an absolute war for these two teams to deliver that type of an ACC championship game. It was tied up with a few minutes to go, but too much Duke down the stretch. They just pulled away. They made the plays that they needed to. As really, it was just one of those great ACC championship games. But another fantastic outing by Cam Boozer, Isaiah Evans, who I mentioned earlier. He's back. Not injured. I forget who the other Duke point guard is that got hurt, but 20 points for Isaiah Evans. He was outstanding, 4 of 8 from deep. But Cam Boozer, Caden Boozer, both in double figures. What a moment! Caden Boozer played all 40 minutes and really helped that Duke offense go as they lost their point guard to injury alongside. They lost Caleb Foster. Sorry about that, not Isaiah Evans. So with Caleb Foster and Pat Ngungba out, that's a big situation to watch unfold in the NCAA tournament. But Caden Boozer stepped up again, all 40 minutes. That's outstanding. That's really hard to do against a Virginia team that, again, relies on depth. They have seems like 9 guys that play in double figures every night. Nobody plays more than 30 minutes. Malik Thomas topped out at 30. But this Virginia team is just so intriguing because when you look at what they could do in the NCAA tournament, you have a lot of players who have invested a lot in coming to UVA and playing for Ryan Odom and getting that program back to the level that you'd expect UVA to be at. But, who's going to be the star? Who's going to take over? Who's going to become a one shining moment type of player? That's what I'm interested to see as the NCAA tournament unfolds. But nonetheless, they play so hard for that program, and they looked like a completely different team than they did having played at Cameron Indoor at the end of February, where they got blown out, wasn't really competitive. And I think when you look at this UVA team, they're so deep. They've got to be able to ride that. They've got to be able to find that way to make that move as a program in the NCAA tournament under Ryan Odom. And so the way they just have that depth, it's a great story for league play. I'm intrigued to see how that goes in the NCAA tournament. Is it something where they can hit you with waves, because they're going to face Wright State, and I think they'll be fine, in that first round game. But when you see them, as far as having that star power, that player that can take over, that's a concern I have for this team going into the NCAA tournament. But Duke was just too good. They captured their 3rd ACC championship in 4 years under John Shire, and he's just been terrific as the Duke head coach. And this Duke team can go a long way as the number 1 overall seed. And one guy who certainly had Duke as the number 1 overall seed going into bracketology's final round was our friend James Fletcher of On3, who we're excited to welcome in now. The craziness is over, James, and of course for you in predicting this. But how did you feel it went overall for yourself? Let's do a self-reflection to start things off.
Yeah, I thought it went pretty well. Of course, we hit on 68 out of 68 teams in the field. That's always the goal to get that done. But we also hit on 54 of those 68 on the correct seed line. So that's really the biggest gauge of how well you did. And really beyond anything, what I was the most proud of and what I think is the best indication of how we did was that we did not have a single team in the entire field. Like, we hit on all of them, and no teams were 2 seed lines off of where they ended up in the selection committee's eyes. So we were able to gauge pretty well where these teams were going to land. I can also get into some of the specifics on, where they landed, how accurately we predicted regions, things like that. But that's for the general fan. Yes, that's the biggest thing that we were able to do, get all the teams correct that were in the field and the first 4 out as well. But then also to get the teams on the correct seed lines. So that means that fans who have followed along have had a pretty accurate representation of what the NCAA tournament was going to look like if they followed along with bracketology.
With Duke being the number 1 overall seed, they win the ACC championship. Do you think that was determined, once they captured that ACC championship on Saturday, or did Purdue knocking off Michigan play a role there? I mean, how close was it for them, going into that number one overall seed conversation?
Yeah, Duke should have been the clear number one once they won the ACC tournament. That was kind of the situation going into things, it looked like. And that was kind of proven by the way that the selection committee ended up setting up the bracket. I said last week that it was pretty much whoever won was going to get the advantage. And so that meant that Duke, being in the first spot, if they won the ACC tournament, they were number one. If Michigan won out and Duke had lost, Michigan would have jumped to that number one spot. But in the scenario that did play out, the way that things actually went when we put it on the hardwood, Duke won, Michigan lost, Arizona won. And so it turned out Duke, Arizona, Michigan was the way that the committee decided to seed those teams. That was the most interesting thing at the top of the bracket, at least, was the separation between Arizona and Michigan, choosing to really put some impact on that Big Ten championship, something that the committee has been kind of picked apart for in recent years. Do they really take into account those Sunday results? Do they have a tangible impact on the bracket? This committee went out of their way to say, yes, we do value all the way through the wire. We are going to take every result into account.
Let me ask you this. You released the seed list, and there's been some controversy around this. We flip all the way to the end of the bracket. We'll go back to Duke at some point. Miami of Ohio on the seed list is behind Texas, NC State, SMU. The NCAA Tournament Committee Chair, Keith Gill, said that Miami of Ohio was above all of those teams in the first four. What are we going to get the right answer here? Because CBS said it, that Miami of Ohio was the last team in, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, all right. So SMU, NC State weren't the last teams in. Texas was in. And then the committee chair comes around and says it. And now we've got the seed lists and all of those things saying Miami of Ohio's the last team in. What say you?
Right. So we did get clarification last night from Keith Gill on a teleconference. He did explain, kind of break down further that situation. What happened is that
what had happened was
yes, that's really it takes a little bit of explaining here. The way the selection committee works is that each team has to create a certain amount of support in that room. Once you get a certain number of votes that you are worthy of an NCAA tournament spot, you are in the field. You cannot be taken back out of the field. So once they vote on you and you are in the field, you are there. They can't go back and say, oh, actually, well, we think that 4 more teams that we're still debating should go in. So let's look at the teams that we already put in. Let's see if we want to take one of those out. So that's what happened here. Miami, Ohio had support to enter the NCAA tournament before Texas, NC State, and SMU. At least they met the threshold of the number of committee members that needed to support them. And so they were in the field. They were not the last team that was selected into the field. However, once they scrub the data, which basically means that they run it through their algorithms, they update the net rankings, wins above bubble, all the metrics that they look at, and then they evaluated the full NCAA tournament field, they did determine that Miami, Ohio's resume among those where they should be seated was the lowest of those 4, but they already had the support to be in. So they were not the last team put into the field, but they are the lowest ranked team in the field.
Got it. That is helpful. That helps out the common fan a lot as they look at this and they're like, all right, tell me how it is. What was the most like, is the first 4 pretty accurate for you? I know all 68 teams nailed by On3 in terms of bracketology, but is that first 4, is that an accurate group like that you feel like is the best first 4 or the most accurate first 4?
I thought that it was a very accurate first 4. The only thing that I really had flipped was NC State on the 10 seed line. Would have had probably Missouri be the team that I kind of tended to knock down into that conversation, but clearly they did like Missouri's wins above the bubble metric. That played a big role in their kind of leap above that last 4 in. And with NC State, you really can't argue too much with their process in dropping them to this category. Ultimately, what ended up happening is NC State was not dinged, but they didn't get the full value of some of their wins because they did face some teams that were dealing with injuries down the stretch. in some of their wins. They obviously had some losses that they took down the stretch as well. And so when you take into account that a team is on a losing streak and their only wins that came during that time, SMU without BJ Edwards, Clemson down some players, that ended up knocking them and really made that Missouri resume add up and compare a little bit more favorably against them. That's why they end up down here in that last four in.
And as far as the first four matchups that we've got, let's break those down a little bit. Let's start with Texas NC State. This is a rematch. I mean, the NCAA tournament committee, I don't know if they necessarily try all that hard to avoid this stuff, but this has already been settled on the floor. And I'm a little surprised we got dished this matchup versus maybe just flipping SMU and NC State and saying, hey, let's have a little old Southwest Conference rematch. Let's try to get some fans in the building for SMU Texas. And then you've got Miami, Ohio facing off against NC State. And I think two coaches that would have been really interesting nonetheless, let alone Sean Miller versus Will Wade.
Yeah, I think the argument that the committee would give you against that is that they do seed this, and then it is the first two teams and then the second two teams, and that's how they match up. Now, common sense would tell you you're the ones who seeded those teams, so you could have seeded them a little bit differently. But I do think that what's interesting about this Texas NC State matchup is that NC State has looked like a different team than the first time that they met. NC State has gone through ups and downs throughout the season, looked like they were kind of climbing, and then they had a little bit of a fall off. Can they get back to where they were last time they faced Texas? Or does this team just look different than it did the first time around? Does this Texas team look the same as it did? Or do they have something different up their sleeve, a little bit more time together? So yes, it is a rematch, but I do think that it is still going to be one of the most intriguing matchups, could be one of the closest matchups we see in this first week here of the SEC or the NCAA tournament.
And then SMU versus Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio, give a little background for ACC fans that maybe didn't watch the Red Hawks advance to a 31-0 record and do all the things that they did in the regular season. And of course, they missed out. They feel like they left some meat on the bone for sure in the MAC tournament, but still a extremely productive offensive team that has a ton of depth in scoring.
Yeah, 31-0, that's the big headline. That's what everyone's going to know about Miami, Ohio. Of course, they did lose in the MAC tournament, so they have a loss on their schedule now. But what you need to know about this team is that, yes, you're going to hear their strength of schedule picked apart. You're going to hear that they didn't play anybody. But at the end of the day, they beat everyone that they lined up against for 31 straight games. And that's something that no one else in college basketball could say. And that's why we turn to analytics. That's why we look at people's resumes rather than just eyeballing it, going on the strength of the conference, going off of what we know about the program. We have this data. Let's take it into account. One of the most important things to look at, wins above bubble. That's one of the things that the selection committee has looked really hard at in these last couple of years. Miami, Ohio was a +3, really above +3 in that category. And what that tells you is that they won 3 more games than the average bubble team. And we're talking about the NCAA tournament bubble here with the first 4. They won 3 more games against that schedule than what an SMU, an Auburn, or Oklahoma on the wrong side of things, a Texas would have been expected to do against that same schedule. And so, yes, you can pick apart the strength of schedule, but consistency is the name of the game here. If you are able to win all of those games, you did something that most teams that are finding themselves in the bubble conversation would not be able to do.
And we get to the rest of the NCAA tournament bracket, and let's start with UVA. They end up kind of getting rewarded for, I think, how well they played in the ACC tournament, taking Duke to the wire in that ACC championship on a neutral court. They fell just short. I mean, what a story that would have been if they could have knocked Duke off, but they don't. They land a 3 seed. I mean, they were, for the most part, a lot of people had them as a 4. They get Wright State. I mean, what's your thought on the Hoos and just getting rewarded for, I think, what really the season that they had, but also really the run to the ACC championship?
Yeah, I do think they were rewarded. Their analytics continued to tick up throughout that ACC tournament. It wasn't just playing Duke close, but really those few days that they were winning games, they continued to climb up the board. Now, part of that was teams that were losing elsewhere, but part of it was the strength of those performances. And we've talked about it. This is a very consistent Virginia team. This is a Virginia team that I really don't think when you're filling out your bracket that you're too worried about in the first round, maybe not even the second round. It'll depend, of course, on the matchup, but they've just been a consistent force all the way through the season, and they've kept that up, and they kept it up into the postseason. They get rewarded for that, rightfully so. And now here they go into the NCAA tournament with what is a pretty favorable, I would say, path forward into the second weekend.
And I would say outside of Duke, UVA, it seems like there's no consistency in the group of ACC tournament teams. I mean, you could say Miami, but kind of disappointing the way they kind of played against UVA in a sense. But really, I mean, a Miami team was very good in year one under Jay Lucas, but they didn't have some of the metrics to really be maybe as high as I thought they could have ended up going. What's your take on Miami? They end up as a 7 seed in the tournament. They're going to have an opportunity to, I think their matchup is really interesting. Oh yeah, they got to play Missouri in St. Louis. It's basically a home game for the Tigers. A tough draw there for Jay Lucas.
Yeah, it was a brutal draw there because it comes down to the bracketing principles that they talk about. One of those principles is that the higher seeded team is not supposed to be in a road environment. However, there are other principles that rank above that one. And so that one got tossed out the window to make the rest of the bracket work. Miami ends up having to go to St. Louis and play against Missouri. So not going to be an easy matchup by any means. That kind of adds to the challenge that they're going to face. I do think that they should still be considered a team that can get out of this first round because Missouri, they went on their own skid to end the regular season. They had a chance to lock themselves into the field a little bit more than they did get out of that bubble conversation, and they lost some games down the stretch. This is a team that really hasn't strung together wins since the end of February, rolling into March. So I think that Miami still has an opportunity here. They have the players to get the job done, but it's going to be a really good matchup there. I think that's one of the most intriguing 7-10 games that we have in this bracket.
And when you look at Miami, I mean, they've got, I think a pretty good draw there. I mean, even Purdue, I mean, they win the Big 12 or Big 10, I mean, I think Miami can find a way to get by them with their size and what they built there if they can, get to that game. That's the hard part about it. It feels like that's just such a tough draw right off the bat. But you look across the ACC and there was a lot of inconsistency down the stretch. And we talked about NC State already, but then you look at a team like North Carolina or Louisville with some of the injury questions that they have, and Clemson bouncing North Carolina, but oh, by the way, you lose Carter Welling in that game. It's a really difficult spot to be in for the league as a whole. I think watching Clemson is going to be the most interesting one because maybe with their depth, they at least have the ability to weather that Carter Welling storm a little bit as they adjust to life without him in the tournament.
Yeah, the Clemson one's going to be really fascinating because, like you said, they're a deep team. They're not a team with a star that sits at the top of the pecking order and just dominates the ball, that dominates the scoring. Very consistent. It's spread out over a bunch of players. Now, that can be a really good thing for you, but it can also be a negative because you don't have that guy to just take over. On the other side of the ball, they have pretty much the antithesis of that theory. Yeah. Bennett Sturts is the Iowa offense. Bennett Sturts is that team. And so if Clemson is able to shut him down, they will have a chance. But this is a team that in Iowa has NCAA tournament experience. It didn't come at Iowa. It came at Drake. But this is the Drake team that everyone for the past 2 seasons has been saying, pick them to go deep in your bracket. They're the Cinderella. They're the team that's going to pull off the upset. It's the same players for the most part with a couple of transfer portal additions here and there and the same coach doing it now at Iowa. So tough matchup for Clemson. You talked about Louisville and UNC there too. Really, I think they fell in just the wrong spot, but the right spot based on what happened, but the wrong spot in terms of you're an injured team. You're trying to figure out what you've got. Is Michael Brown going to be at 100%? What percentage do you need him at for him to make an impact on the game? If you're UNC, you're down Caleb Wilson. And now you got to go face an 11 seed. And those 11 seeds, they've proven to be kind of the new 12 seed in the past few years. Those are the teams that come in hungry, come in with a little bit something to prove. And when they get hot, it can be a challenge to get through those games.
I think one of the most intriguing matchups is Louisville, South Florida. Brian Hodgkins is headed up to really an area he knows well. One of his home areas where he's from, basically, as they'll play in Buffalo. I think you've got to be, if you're Louisville, just you're on red alert. It's the NCAA tournament upset, all those things. But, Pat Kelsey and this team, they're really good when they're on, even without Michael Brown. I mean,
Right.
they were able to weather a little bit of that storm in the early season and showed some of it, but obviously weren't able to overcome it in the ACC tournament after they fell to SMU, or they beat SMU and then fell to Miami. This is a Louisville team that can go a little bit if they can get past this first one against a South Florida team that probably playing with a lot of confidence, but also at the same time, is your coach going to be there next year too?
Mhm. I like this South Florida team in this matchup. I really do, because we know that they're going to play with pace. They're going to shoot 3-pointers. That's kind of the formula for an upset. But they also, Brian Hodgson, from that Alabama tree, they count the blue collar points. They're a team that's going to play hard for the full game. They're going to be diving on the floor for loose balls. They're going to have that energy up the entire time. And so that's something that if you're the higher ranked team, you can't come in there and mess around. You can't come in there feeling like, okay, let's get through this game and worry about the next round, because they will sneak up on you quick. They will hit a couple threes to start the game, and suddenly you're figuring it out. And to compound that, Louisville's biggest struggles this season, I feel like, have come when Michael Brown, not when he's healthy, not when he's injured, but when he's in flux. When they don't know what percentage they have him at, when they don't know whether he's going to play. It's hard to build that game plan out, because you've got other guys who can handle the ball. You've got other players who can get that offense going, but it's a different style when you do that. When Isaac McNeely is on the ball a lot more, it's just a different offensive flow. Guys are in different positions than when Michael Brown is kind of dominating that offense and getting things started. So I think that's where they face the biggest challenge. Do they know absolutely that they have Michael Brown at the ability they need him to coming into this game?
Yeah, it's a huge question. I think a question that I have too is around North Carolina, as they'll take on VCU, a team that is also playing with confidence, and Caleb Wilson obviously out for the rest of the year, but then they go out and they lose to Clemson. It's this North Carolina team could, and we've seen them kind of get hot in the tournament. They've kind of overcome some things before, but I don't know. I don't have a good feeling going into this one with the Tar Heels.
Yeah, it's hard to peg down what they're going to be. I don't think that they're going to be a second weekend team for sure at this point, the way that they've been playing. But this first round matchup is really fascinating, because VCU has been a very solid team. They were a bubble team with an at-large resume before they went and won the A10. And so with Lazar Djokovic, does he give them a lot of challenges? Does he kind of make things difficult for Henry Visar in the middle there? What are those veteran guards that VCU has able to do to a UNC team that has been searching for consistency in the backcourt all season? I do ultimately just give the edge to UNC here. I think that Visar is going to do just enough. I think that he's going to be consistent enough to provide them that kind of anchor they need. And then we got to get one more Seth Trimble game, right? I feel like before he goes out, he's going to have one more moment with the Tar Heels. He's done it so many times here. I think that you're going to get one big performance from him, at least here in the NCAA tournament, before he goes out in his college career.
Yeah, that I feel like Seth Trimble is made for the one shining moment video. Are we wrong?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. He's hit those big shots before. There'll be one in that highlight reel, I'm sure.
Who do you have? Who's your Elite Eight? Who's your Final Four? Who are your teams to watch that can really go deep, not only in the ACC, but in this tournament in general?
Yeah, my Final Four, as I've kind of gone through the bracket the first couple of times and figured out what matchups I do like, is Duke out of the East, Houston meeting them out of the South there. They will have home court advantage in the second weekend in Houston. I think that's going to be huge for them. We know that this is two programs that have kind of slipped up and maybe missed out on some chances to be in the Final Four, make it to the national championship game in recent years. But I do think that Duke is so dominant there. If they can continue to get healthy, get their players back more and more into the system, Ngongba in the middle is going to be big for them. Does Caleb Foster come back if we get into the second weekend or into the Final Four? That's to be determined, but Caden Boozer looked like a capable replacement for him in that ACC tournament. Of course, still went on to win it, even though they played a couple closer games than they were used to playing. I think now they're a little bit more adjusted to what life without those two is going to look like. But on the other side, I do have Arkansas and Michigan coming out on the other side. I think that Darius Acuff is red hot. I think that this Arkansas team, they don't have the depth. If they get into foul trouble, they could get into a real sticky situation at any round of this tournament. But I do like this team. I think that Acuff has just been on a whole different level for the last month or so, shooting almost 50% from three in recent weeks. So he's just untouchable right now. I think he's going to lead this team to really big things. And that matchup potentially against Arizona would be huge. That'd be one of the games of the tournament for sure. On the bottom there, Michigan, I don't think they're invincible. We've seen them lose to Wisconsin. We've seen them lose to Duke, of course. No shame in that. And then we saw them lose to Purdue. I don't think they're invincible by any means, but I just don't see the right matchup to knock them out of this tournament, out of their bracket, at least the way I have things falling. And so I do have them making it to the Final Four as well.
Can Duke, be that storybook team? Can they do it?
I really think they can. I think they're the best team in college basketball. And so it's hard to bet against them to win the national championship. They are the team that I have going through beating Michigan in that national championship game. That's what I'm rolling with right now. And until we see them take a loss, that's what I'm going to stick with, because they've just been so good for so long now. We saw them I think once they beat Michigan in that regular season, barring anything that could have happened since then, that's when I kind of decided this is the team I'm rolling with. They are my national championship pick, and it's going to take something big to get me off of that. They've continued to win ever since then, so they will remain in that position until they lose, which of course will mean I have to pick a different national champion.
I think Duke, Florida. That's where I'm at. I will also say I saw a tweet, and I'm sure you've probably seen it the way your basketball timeline probably is, but I believe since 1998, there's not been a team from the western side of the United States that's won the national championship. So those of you who are maybe picking Arizona or thinking about it, it would certainly go against a lot of history there. But of course,
saw another stat that teams that wear red have not won the national championship since I think it's 2002. So
okay, so like I was saying, Duke and SMU meeting in the Final Four in the national championship game, whichever side of the bracket. I guess I got to pick. So wearing red I would love to see. I can't wait. Hopefully, we get this matchup: Rick Pitino versus John Shire. Speaking of St. John's, they've just done. I kind of think they were a little. I don't know. I thought they would get a little bit more credit. I know the Big East wasn't incredible this year. Was that a seed line that you had?
Yeah, I had them on the 5 seed eventually because Arkansas ended up winning the SEC tournament, but I had them on the 4 seed line before that. I did think that putting Kansas on the 4 seed line above St. John's and Vanderbilt, that was my biggest gripe with the selection committee. I just don't see it in the numbers. I don't see it in the resumes. And so I'm not really sure. I understand that Kansas had a really good season. There's nothing to take away from them there. It just felt like Vanderbilt had really proven itself. Wins against Florida, coming down into the SEC championship game, making that a contest against Arkansas. You look at what St. John's did, beat out UConn, which was a higher seed for the regular season and conference tournament championships there in the Big East. I just thought that both of those teams had better resumes. I wouldn't have had any complaints with either of them being the 4 seed with Kansas as the 5, but to have Kansas as a 4 seed and both of those teams on the 5 line, that felt a little bit off in terms of what I had the seed line there. And I wasn't fully confident in what that one turned out. I'll give you here before we get out, I'll give you my Cinderella team. I've got one team.
Oh.
I've got one team that I'm picking into the second weekend from below the 10 seed range, and it's Akron.
Oh,
we just talked about Miami, Ohio. Yes, they were the Cinderella. They took all the storylines out of the MAC. But this Akron team is on the 5th longest win streak in college basketball right now. They've dropped one game since the beginning of January, the early weeks of January. And they are on an absolute tear. They match up well against some of these top teams. They shoot the 3 a lot. They've got a star guard in Tavares Johnson who has been tearing it up in recent weeks. He can get you 20, 30 points, whatever you need from him. And we know that guard play is important. They face an injured Texas Tech team that is down not just JT Toppin, but Christian Anderson's not at 100%. Lawan Watts was injured during their Big 12 tournament run. So favorable matchup there. And then you get an Alabama team that's been inconsistent in the second round. I think Toledo has a real path towards the second weekend here.
Boy, Travis Steele would love to see it for his brother, John Gross, the head coach over there. I mean, that would be something. I know they missed out on a chance to face each other in the MAC tournament. That would have been something as well.
Yeah, that would have been a big one. I think it would have really kind of solidified, if Akron had been able to win it, that this team means business hitting into the NCAA tournament.
No doubt. Well, look, James Fletcher took plenty of your time this morning. Thanks so much for all of the just bracketology and nuggets and all the news you've given us leading up to the NCAA tournament. We look forward to chatting with you more as the tournament unfolds. Enjoy March Madness.
Yep, anytime. Appreciate it.
There he goes, James Fletcher, joining us on All Access AM. We appreciate him, as always, checking in with us and going through what is just an incredible time of year for him as he continues to break it all down for all of our All Access AM listeners. Please do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel if you haven't already. That gives us more support. That helps us out when it comes to all of the things that we want to do as far as booking guests and making us a legitimate program covering the ACC Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 to 9 a.m. Central Time. Every single Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll be here for you guys. And speaking of being here, our friends at Corporate Magic are there for you and your company, your business, your event. With decades of experience at producing high level events, they can make your dreams become reality. And whether it is a national sales meeting that you need just all the glitz and glamour for, or a production at a stadium, or a production that is broadcast globally, seen by millions, our friends at Corporate Magic can do that for you. So visit corporatemagic.com for more information on their work, what all they can do for you, and see if it makes sense for your business or company to partner with them on an event in the near future. So they have a ton of different offerings and examples of what they can do for you. But I'll tell you this, with all their experience, they'll lead the design process to the execution phase with just incredible attention to detail. So visit corporatemagic.com to learn more today. Want to transition to a little bit of ACC football here as we close out the show on this Monday. The running back position in the ACC is seeing a little bit of a change from last year's group, but also some key names returning. I mean, gone are some of the league's leading rushers like Jamari Taylor, Haynes King, of course. We've seen some changes in some of the players transferring. Turbo Richard is gone. Hollywood Smothers is gone. Damon Claiborne's to the NFL. TJ Harden off to the next level for SMU. Adam Randall has departed from Clemson. We have all sorts of change at the running back position, but what we also have are some incredible running backs returning. And I think the time is now to highlight some of those players and a couple of them that I think coming into the 2026 season that deserve their flowers right off the bat. They're the two 1,000-yard rushers that are back in the ACC, and not only back in the ACC, they're back at their schools. And that is Nate Shepard of Duke, who's the second leading rusher in the league with 1,132 yards, but also Mark Fletcher Jr., 1,192 yards, just edging out Nate Shepard at Miami. Mark, of course, became kind of a belle of the ball in this sense with helping Miami get to the national championship game. His mom obviously following him every step of the way, driving all over the country. Just an incredible story there. But with Mark Fletcher, you have the veteran back. You have just this experience, this steadiness, ability to produce that is proven, and he's back for his fourth and final year at Miami, fresh off his first 1,000-yard season. But on the flip side of it, you have Nate Shepard at Duke, who came in as a true freshman and just boom, just absolutely exploded, was terrific catching the football as well, 286 yards through the air and another touchdown, was able to kind of give Duke a little bit of that through the passing game as well. So that is something to watch as he goes into year two. This is a player that Darian Mensah, got poached. Cooper Barkate got poached. But you look at what Nate Shepard brings to the table. If you're looking for a reason for Walter Yet to have a good season as Duke's starting quarterback, the San Jose State transfer, it's got to be Nate Shepard. He's just got an unbelievable ability to make people miss. And again, he's just getting started. So he's one of the most exciting backs in the country. He and Mark Fletcher, you've got to kind of circle those early Doak Walker watch list guys. I'm sure they'll land on that list. And two really good dudes, both at kind of, again, opposite ends of their career, but two that the ACC can kind of hang their hat on as proven commodities going into the 2026 season. Now, here is a name that I want you guys to file away, and there's two reasons why for this. But one is Isaac Brown, the Louisville running back. You've got his production from the 2024 season as he exploded. Well, guess what? When he was healthy in 2025, he jumped up a level as far as yards per carry, 8.8 over that 7.1 yards per carry average as a freshman in 2024. He exploded. He dealt with some injury issues, but man, when he is on, I mean, he's the best running back in the ACC. The last 2 years, he's led the league in yards per carry average. I just think he is going into this season as one, he's coming off of those injuries. He's looking to be healthier. That's a reason one why you've got to watch, that type of production. Can it be there again, or will he be kind of prone to injury? But also, you have a first time starting quarterback in Lincoln Kienholz at Louisville. So when you factor in the Isaac Brown conversation, and I believe they have Kewan Scott back too. I could be wrong on that, but I think he might have transferred. I think they lost one of the guys to transfer. Yeah, he's back. But you have Isaac Brown's incredible playmaking ability. What is the best way to help a young quarterback, or a quarterback that just needs the help in general? That might not be the best. You need a great running game. And that's what Lincoln Kienholz needs from Isaac Brown. They need that production. They need that offensive line to step up. And that's an offensive line that, look, it needs to step back up. It needs to improve as a whole, as it does deal with the loss of its offensive line coach, as they lost their former offensive line coach to Alabama. But they did hire Dale Williams, who's a veteran coach. I believe they hired Dale Williams, and seeing all the stories on him. But he's going to have to rework that offensive line and get it on the right track for Louisville going into this season, as they will have a new quarterback and somebody that they're looking to protect. They're looking to improve. That was an area that I felt like Louisville really fell short in 2025. It was kind of interesting to see, Richard Owens leave for Alabama, but he's going as the tight ends coach. So kind of not necessarily a slap in the face, but kind of a deal where, okay, he leaves. You got an opportunity to upgrade your offensive line. Isaac Brown being healthy would go a long way. Two transfers that I want to keep an eye on here as well, though, in the ACC. And one is within the league, one is coming from outside the league. But start with Kendrick Raphael, coming over from Cal. He's a veteran of the ACC. He's been productive generally every place he's been. He comes from Cal, goes to SMU. Of course, he was at NC State for 2 years before transferring to Cal. But this past year, he led the ACC in carries. So he's got a workhorse mentality. But of course, he also was able to lead the league in plays from scrimmage just as a whole. So he's got that ability, that workhorse mentality. He's coming to SMU where they're looking for a TJ Harden replacement. They're looking for an experienced back to be that one difference maker for Kevin Jennings, who missed having a Brashard Smith last year. You get somebody who had over 1,000 yards of all-purpose yardage in 2025 behind a Cal offensive line that wasn't very good. Kendrick Raphael could be the difference for SMU's offense this year, as well as Kevin Jennings' health. You put Kevin Jennings healthy and you put Kendrick Raphael in that backfield and that normal productive self that he is, that's scary for opposing defensive coordinators to have to try to defend as a whole. Justice Haynes was the big story, though. Kendrick Raphael kind of went under the radar. Justice Haynes going to Georgia Tech from Michigan by way of Alabama is the big storyline as far as transfers into the conference goes. Justice Haynes, he comes from Michigan, 7.1 yards per carry last year. He comes back to, his home area, kind of a program that he certainly has familiarity with. He had 900 plus yards from the line of scrimmage last year for the Wolverines. And Brent Key, with a new starting quarterback, needs this. This is the whole kind of emphasis his program is built on his physicality, being able to run the ball, but they had to do it with Haynes King for the most part last year. And I think that reliance on Haynes King didn't hurt them long term, but it certainly left Haynes King, being a little bit more beat up as a whole. So having Justice Haynes could be a big difference maker for whoever ends up being that starting quarterback for Georgia Tech. Is it Alberto Mendoza? That is what we're going to be watching this spring as Tech unfolds its spring with a new offensive coordinator. Pitt, though, in a key retention piece, did get Kyrian Turner. He is an explosive running back who's from the state of Florida, went all the way up to Pittsburgh. They keep him in Pittsburgh. This is big for Mason Heinschel as he's able to bring in one of the top explosive playmakers back to the ACC. He had over 740. He had 745 yards as a freshman in 2025. Just has that ability to make explosive plays. This is a big retention piece. Keep an eye on him to become maybe that household name in the league. And I think Marcellus Hawkins is somebody who's experienced now, another 750-ish yard rusher. Can James Franklin and that Virginia Tech team rely on him in a big way this season? That's something I'm going to be keeping a close eye on as Marcellus Hawkins returns for this season as well. And kind of splish-splashing around the rest of the ACC, I'm intrigued to see what some of these running backs like Jaden Scott can do at NC State without Hollywood Smothers. He averaged over 5 yards a carry, almost 6. He now gets to be that lead back alongside CJ Bailey, and you bring him into the fold. And on the other side of NC State UNC, they need more from Damon June over there for the Tar Heels. Average 5.5 yards per carry, but just 464 yards of rushing. That UNC as a whole, just offensively, they need more. They did not get it as a whole. No rusher was over 464 total yards, which is kind of scary. They did have a couple that they rotated in, but you get him back. Micah Ford at Stanford is an intriguing one. Can Stanford continue to build that offensive line back up where they can run the football? And then, you get somebody in Evan Dickens coming into the league from Liberty. He goes to Boston College. This is where I circle, if you want a dark horse, can BC get back to being physical? 1,339 yards rushing for Evan Dickens at Liberty. He led the conference in touchdowns with 16. Also, just a really, really experienced back now. So can BC get that out of him? He's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. That is a really strong pickup for BC. Can he make the jump over to BC and do it at a high level? The wild cards out of this group, I've got a couple here. Two that transferred into their respective programs. Chris Johnson Jr. from SMU to Clemson. Trey Wisner from Texas to Florida State. Man, I'm watching these guys as really interesting pieces. FSU has not. I don't know how to feel about Trey Wisner because I covered him in high school. I've obviously watched his production at Texas. A really, really good 2024 season for him. 2025 was a little bit of a step back. That whole Texas program struggled up front. Now he gets a fresh start at FSU. Is it going to be enough? Is FSU good enough up front to make things happen? And the same goes for Chris Johnson Jr. Chad Morris, Dabo Sweeney, Clemson, they're talking him up like he's going to be this, explosive back in this Clemson offense. But look, Chris Johnson Jr. had that ability to be explosive at SMU, but it was boom or bust with him. So how much can Chad Morris's offense get out of Chris Johnson Jr.? Because, of course, on paper, it sure looks the part. It sure looks to be in good shape. I also look to Adam Mohammed coming over from Washington to Cal. He had over 500 yards rushing, nearly 5 yards a carry. That's another dark horse to keep an eye on as they keep a close eye on him. But look, this running back group for the ACC as a whole, I just think has a good opportunity to be a kind of a like running a league of running backs this year. You know, there's so much conversation around quarterbacks in this league, and rightfully so. But keep an eye on the running backs. I think there's a chance that if guys stay healthy, you could be looking at a group of like 4 or 5 running backs that hit that 1,000-yard mark, and that'd be good for the league. That'd be something that the league could certainly hang its hat on. But a lot of young talent that's kind of emerging in this league too. So we'll see who ends up going from unknown to household name in 2026. But wanted to highlight the running backs on this edition of All Access AM. So hope you guys have a great Monday. We've got tournament action, March Madness starting Tuesday night with Texas NC State, and then SMU Miami of Ohio on Wednesday. Late action in the first 4 before we get into Thursday, Friday, which is just some of the best days of the year in sports. So I hope you guys enjoyed this All Access AM. We'll be here to break it down all for you guys, and we'll figure out what our Wednesday, Thursday looks like with travel and NCAA tournament things. So we'll be back later this week. We'll just keep you guys in the loop of what it looks like. So I hope you guys enjoyed this edition of All Access AM. Catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching, and appreciate you guys doing that and subscribing to the channel. So catch you next time. I'm Billy Embody.